Imagine standing at the edge of a battlefield where no swords clash, no armies roar, and no blood spills. Yet the war is very real. It is the war of the heart, the place where trust was broken, where innocence was trampled, and where the deepest wounds were inflicted, not by strangers, but by the very ones you trusted the most. These are not injuries of the body, but of the soul. And in the quiet corners of the night, when the world is still and all noise fades, that pain it whispers, it aches, it remembers. Have you ever wondered why God allows such betrayal? Why He stands silent when you are bleeding in silence from a wound someone else inflicted without hesitation or remorse? Why He doesn't thunder from heaven and defend you immediately? The answer is both a mystery and a miracle. You see, God is not ignorant of your pain. He is not absent in your sorrow. He is patient, He is just, and in His silence, a divine strategy unfolds. One that does not only expose the truth, but brings justice in a way far more powerful than any revenge you could ever design. The one who hurt you, who spoke lies with a smile, who broke your trust and left you shattered, is not forgotten. No sin escapes God's attention, and no wound you carry goes unnoticed in heaven. What they thought was cleverness was recorded. What they dismissed as harmless was written in eternity's ink. Regret is a strange punishment. It arrives not with the noise of consequences, but with the haunting echo of choices made. It is the voice that whispers when no one else is around. It is the weight that presses on the soul when the lights go out and memories come to life. And God, in His divine justice, allows this regret to become their teacher. The very same regret that will break them down in the exact measure they once used to break you. This isn't about vengeance. No, this is about truth prevailing. God doesn't seek to embarrass or destroy like men do. He seeks to awaken, to reveal, to redeem. But some people, in their arrogance, refuse redemption until regret crushes their pride to dust. Picture the betrayer years down the line, smiling in public but haunted in private. They see someone who reminds them of you, and suddenly their chest tightens. A song plays and their eyes water because it stirs the ghost of what they did. Their success tastes bland. Their laughter is hollow. Their relationships collapse because they never addressed the rot within. That is how regret works. It shows up when you think you've escaped it, and God lets it. He lets it speak. He lets it scream. He lets it do what no human words could do. Bring them to their knees. The very silence you endured will now echo in their life as a deafening void they cannot fill. They will remember the way they spoke to you, the things they did behind your back, the loyalty they twisted, the kindness they used, the betrayal they denied. And it will not fade, it will grow, until they finally face themselves. And you, oh, you are not forgotten in this story. You are not the weak one. You are the chosen one. The one God protects even in the silence. The one He lifts, not by punishing others through your hands, but by showing you that He fights in His own way. He breaks the proud, He humbles the cruel. He lets regret become their wilderness, and His justice the compass they cannot escape. So do not be disheartened. Do not wish for revenge. Instead, wait. Stay pure, stay soft. Let God finish what He has started. Because when God allows regret to crush someone, it's not out of cruelty, it's out of cosmic fairness. A justice so poetic that even the stars would weep if they could see it. The person who hurt you thought they got away, but what they didn't see was the silent hand of God weaving regret into their future. And when it hits, it won't just hurt, it will transform or destroy. That choice will be theirs, but justice will be God's. Now let us journey deeper into this truth with 7 powerful insights that reveal exactly how God works in silence, through time, and by regret. God's silence isn't absence, it's set up for justice. There is a strange and terrifying comfort in the silence of God. To many it appears as abandonment, to others it feels like injustice, but to those who walk closely with Him, that silence becomes a sacred space where something greater is being written. You may have cried out in anguish, asking, "Why did you not stop them, God? Why didn't you intervene when I was breaking?" And in response, nothing but stillness. No thunder, no voice, just pain and confusion lingering in your soul like an unanswered prayer. But silence in God's world is never apathy. It is preparation. We tend to forget that God sees further than our eyes can reach. While you see the wound, He sees the healing already written. While you witness betrayal, He sees the harvest of justice being planted quietly behind the veil of time. It is often in that void, that painful stretch where nothing seems to happen, that everything is actually happening. The one who hurt you may be celebrating now. They may think they've succeeded, that they've escaped consequences because the heavens didn't roar. But justice from God never arrives with a trumpet. It arrives with precision. When God remains silent, it is not because He is inactive. It is because His justice is deeper than our demands. He is not concerned with mere reactions. He orchestrates outcomes that echo into eternity. And while they continue with life as if your suffering was trivial, God watches. He watches not with fury alone, but with the wisdom of knowing that regret, shame, and self-correction are far more effective than any punishment we could ever request. So, His silence is not weakness, it's strategy. It's the patient unfolding of divine justice. While you heal, grow, and rise again, God is setting the stage, not just for their downfall, but for your elevation. His silence is the pause before a powerful turning point, a delay that sharpens the blow of reality when it eventually arrives. You see, when justice comes too soon, it teaches nothing. But when it comes, after arrogance has reached its peak, after pride has celebrated too loudly, that's when it cuts deepest. And let us not forget, God's justice doesn't always break the body. Often it crushes the soul. That's where regret enters. That's where their memories begin to turn against them. That's when the laughter they once enjoyed turns bitter, and the success they flaunted becomes a reminder of who they had to destroy to get there. It's in that place that God's silence begins to roar, a quiet roar that no one hears externally, but it thunders inside the guilty heart like Judgment Day arrived early. And you begin to understand. You begin to see that every tear you shed was counted, every silent scream was heard, every injustice recorded, not by men, but by the God who writes histories and reverses fates. And suddenly, His silence becomes your strength, because while they laughed in ignorance, you endured in faith. And that endurance becomes the very altar upon which God places His justice, not rushed, not forced, but perfect. The weight of regret is God's hidden sword. Regret is not a feeling, it is a haunting. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not chase, it waits. It shows up when the crowds are gone, when the lies have run out, and when the soul is finally left alone with itself, and in that moment it does what no punishment ever could. It pierces the conscience. God, in His perfect wisdom, often chooses this quiet torment as His most powerful form of justice. To the one who hurt you, their actions may have felt justified. They may have convinced themselves that you were too weak, too trusting, too easy to deceive. They may have walked away feeling triumphant. But regret, true, divine regret, is not immediate. It builds like a storm, held back by invisible hands, gathering strength until the moment is right. And when God releases it, it doesn't destroy from the outside in, it crushes from the inside out. Regret has no physical form, yet it can suffocate. It has no weight, yet it burdens the soul like iron chains. God allows it to enter quietly. A thought here, a memory there, a question that won't go away. What if I hadn't hurt them? And slowly the image of you begins to haunt them. Not in anger, but in sorrow. Because now they begin to see what they broke. Not just what they lost, but what they damaged, and they cannot undo it. This is the sword God uses when words have failed. He doesn't need fire to punish. He uses memory. He doesn't need thunder to shake the guilty. He uses reflection. And as they walk forward in life, God places mirrors in their path. People who treat them the way they treated you. Circumstances that echo their past cruelty. Silence that reflects their old indifference. In every moment, regret whispers, "You did this. You caused this. That is the weight they carry." And the most powerful part, you don't have to lift a finger. You don't have to shout, explain, or seek revenge. Because God has already drawn his sword, and it does not miss. The weight of regret falls exactly where it should, not to break them for your sake, but to awaken them for his justice, to make them feel what you felt, but from the inside, where it truly hurts. And while they wrestle with this invisible sword, you begin to breathe freely again, because the pain they gave you was not forgotten. It was simply handed over to a judge whose justice is far more intimate, more poetic, more precise than any you could have imagined. God's hidden sword doesn't cut flesh. It carves truth into the heart of the guilty. And they will live with it, because that's what justice looks like when heaven swings the blade. The one who hurt you will eventually hurt themselves. There is an immutable law written not in books but in the very design of life. What you give will find its way back to you. Not immediately, not always visibly, but inevitably. And when someone uses cruelty, betrayal, or manipulation as their currency, it is not you who will suffer forever. It is them who will become a debtor to their own actions. When God steps back and lets people walk in the direction of their choices, he is not letting them win. He is letting them walk straight into the harvest of what they have sown. The one who hurt you will eventually walk into the same emotional labyrinth they once threw you into. Not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves with their own behavior. And the irony of divine justice is this: it does not always come from an external force. Sometimes it is their own decisions, their own pride, their own treatment of others that becomes the knife they fall on. When someone breaks another person's spirit with no remorse, they begin a chain reaction in the spiritual realm. It's not karma, as people say, it's deeper. It's the justice of God, slowly letting them spiral into the very pain they caused. They'll start to see it in their relationships, in the lack of peace that surrounds their heart, in the way people no longer trust them, in the coldness they once justified but now cannot escape. And perhaps the most terrifying part of this justice is the mirror. Because when someone chooses to destroy someone good, their reflection changes. No matter how much they smile, succeed, or surround themselves with comfort, they begin to see shadows of their own cruelty. And God allows this, not because he is cruel, but because he is just. The soul cannot truly escape the image it projects. You cannot be wicked toward others and expect to sleep peacefully forever. Over time, Their laughter becomes nervous. Their confidence begins to decay, because what they thought they buried in you now resurrects inside them. The lies they told become knots they can't untie. The silence they enjoyed becomes isolation. The emotional games they played with you now play with their own mind. And what do you do during this? You watch, yes, but more importantly, you heal. Because the person who once hurt you will inevitably walk through their own storm, and no one will understand why they're breaking from the inside. But you will. You'll know. You'll recognize the symptoms. You'll see the signs. And you'll realize this wasn't your doing. It was life returning their own hand back to them. The sword they raised has found its way home. Your innocence becomes their indictment in heaven. There is something powerful about being innocent in the eyes of God. Not perfect, none of us are, but innocent in intention, in effort, in the love you gave sincerely. When someone hurts a heart that meant no harm, they do not simply break a relationship. They bring a charge against themselves before the courts of heaven. Because God has always been on the side of the brokenhearted. His word declares it. His actions prove it. And when someone sins not just against you, but against your purity, it becomes far more serious in his sight. They may mock your softness now. They may call your loyalty weakness. They may scoff at the patience you showed. But that same innocence is what testifies against them in God's presence. The way you forgave, the way you tried, the way you never retaliated. These actions rise as witnesses like echoes in a holy courtroom, crying out, "This one was wronged," and heaven listens. In a world that celebrates hardness, manipulation, and pride, your softness is not a liability. It's a weapon, not one that harms, but one that convicts. The one who hurt you may dismiss your character as naive, but to God, that character is sacred. And when they betray it, they don't just betray you, they betray his design, his values, his spirit that was operating through you. He sees everything. Every moment you held your tongue, every tear you held back, every time you prayed for them instead of plotting revenge, and all of it becomes part of the record. While they forget, heaven remembers. While they move on, God writes. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not next month, God will reveal the cost of hurting a pure heart. The truth is, when a person wounds someone who meant them no harm, they condemn themselves more deeply than they know, because there is no excuse in heaven for cruelty against the innocent, no justification, no escape. And the same softness they exploited will become the standard by which they are judged. That's the divine irony. What they laughed at becomes the evidence. What they used becomes the sentence. What they broke becomes the very thing that exposes the brokenness in them. So while they walk confidently in their pride, God waits. He lets their arrogance rise high, because he knows the fall will be just. And when it happens, they won't be able to point fingers. Because your innocence will stand like a mirror before them, one they cannot shatter. What they buried in you will rise as their burden. They thought they buried you, not literally, but spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. They thought the pain they inflicted would crush you into silence, into invisibility, into a corner where you would never rise again. With every lie they told, every manipulation they played, every cold word they delivered, they were piling on more dirt. They thought your soul would suffocate under the weight of betrayal. But what they failed to see is that God does not allow his children to stay buried. He resurrects. You see, when someone breaks you with intention, they are planting a seed, but not the kind they expected. What they were trying to bury was never your weakness. It was your destiny. They mistook silence for defeat. They mistook your tears for the end of your story. And in their pride, they walked away, believing they had destroyed something forever. But God does not forget where his children are buried. And more than that, he does not allow a burial without a resurrection. What they meant for ruin, God turns into revival. What they try to silence becomes your testimony. And while they go on with their lives unaware, what begins to grow in the soil of your suffering is strength, clarity, purpose, healing, and it grows quietly, so quietly that they don't even notice the shift. Then one day, your presence begins to rise again, and not just rise but shine, not in arrogance, but in resilience. You smile again, not because you've forgotten what they did, but because what they did no longer owns you. And that's when it begins. That's when what they buried in you starts to rise as their burden. They begin to feel the weight, not of what they did at the time, but of what it cost. The memory of you now comes with consequences. They begin to see your name in places they didn't expect. Hear your laughter in rooms they no longer enter. Watch as others value the heart they once rejected. And slowly, their mind begins to connect the dots. This is what I tried to kill, but it didn't die. It transformed. Now it follows them, not like a ghost, but like a mirror. Everywhere they turn, there's a reminder of what they tried to silence and failed, and that becomes their burden. The very thing they tried to suppress in you now presses down on them, because what they buried is now alive, and it testifies against them not through revenge, but through your restoration. And in this divine reversal, God shows his power. He shows that no pain endured in innocence is wasted. It becomes a seed for transformation. And those who bury in pride must watch the bloom in silence, because what they buried in you does not die, it rises. And when it does not come back empty. It comes back with justice wrapped in glory. Regret turns the loudest boaster into the quietest soul. There is a peculiar transformation that regret performs. It silences, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow, suffocating retreat. The one who once mocked you loudly, who boasted about how easily they walked away, who flaunted their cruelty as strength. Watch them closely. When regret finds them, it does not ask for permission. It enters silently, like dusk swallowing the day. And the one who once roared begins to whisper, begins to withdraw, begins to crumble inwardly under the weight of what they refused to face before. God often lets the proud speak loudly for a season. He lets them enjoy their echo. He allows the boasting, not because he is powerless, but because he knows how powerful regret is. Boasters always speak from the illusion of control. They talk to hide the emptiness they refuse to acknowledge. But once God begins to stir the truth inside their hearts, once their conscience begins to awaken, they cannot maintain the volume. Their voice, once a tool of arrogance, becomes a reminder of their own blindness. They begin to remember the things they said to you, the way they laughed when you were vulnerable, the way they turned your tears into jokes, the way they twisted your trust and made it entertainment. These memories don't shout back at them, they whisper, and that whisper becomes deafening. And so the proud soul retreats. You'll see it happen, not all at once, but piece by piece. They stop posting, they stop showing up. The charm that once commanded attention begins to fade. They no longer speak of you with confidence because their spirit can't carry the weight anymore. Regret drains energy like poison in the bloodstream. It doesn't need to break their body, it collapses their soul. They may try to recover that voice, to pretend they still believe in their own narrative. But something has shifted. God has entered the conversation. And when he speaks through regret, he silences every false victory. They begin to realize what they lost was not just a relationship, but a piece of themselves, something they may never get back. And you don't have to say a word, because their silence becomes your justice. Their withdrawal becomes your witness. Where once they silenced your truth, now their silence screams it. God does not always answer pain with noise. Sometimes he answers with stillness so loud it shakes the spirit. And those who once boasted against you must now carry the unbearable silence of knowing they were wrong and cannot undo it. God restores you while regret rebuilds or breaks them. The most astonishing part of God's justice is not in how he punishes, but in how he restores. While the one who hurt you is left to wrestle with regret, remorse, and the shadows of their own actions, God begins a quiet rebuilding in you. This rebuilding is sacred. It's not loud or attention-seeking. It's not about revenge or validation. It's a divine restoration. Measured, intentional, and deeply personal. It is the moment when heaven kneels to your pain and begins to lift you, piece by piece, not just to where you were, but far beyond it. You might have thought the pain disqualified you, that being broken made you less worthy of the future, that the betrayal contaminated your dreams. But what if the pain was the door to your becoming? What if God allowed you to be shattered? Not to ruin you, but so that no part of your restoration could be claimed by the one who hurt you, so that your healing would be so divine, so untouchable, that only he could receive the glory. And as he begins to restore you, your joy, your clarity, your strength, something strange happens in the life of the one who caused your pain. Regret begins to either rebuild them or break them. Because regret, when met with repentance, can change a soul. But when resisted, it becomes unbearable. And God allows that crossroad. He gives them the chance to acknowledge, to make right, to seek humility. But if they choose pride again, the regret becomes a slow internal collapse. You, however, are not collapsing. You are rising. And the beauty of this rise is that it happens while they fall. Not because you wished it, but because God orchestrated a divine contrast. The very person who tried to destroy you now has to watch you become what they never imagined. You shine in places they tried to dim. You walk in strength they thought they broke. And every step you take forward becomes another reminder to them of the weight they carry. And this is not about revenge. This is about righteousness. God restores his beloved not to mock the guilty, but to prove that no evil has the final word. He lets regret do its work while grace does its own. The guilty are left to the consequences of their own conscience, while you are lifted by the hands of the one who never stopped watching you. They rebuild or they break. That is their path. But you rise. And as you rise, your scars do not disappear, but they no longer hurt. They no longer bleed. They become marks of survival, signs of sanctification. You no longer cry over the one who hurt you, you pray for them. Because you now understand the difference between pain and purpose, between betrayal and breakthrough, between being crushed and being crowned. That is how God moves. While they sit in silence, you soar in peace. While they rehearse their guilt, you receive your healing. God does not just settle scores. He tells stories, redemption stories, and you are living one. So here you stand now, not in ruins, but in revelation. The one who hurt you, who thought they'd walk away untouched, is now quietly crumbling under the weight of their own choices. Their loud laughter has turned into silent regret, their ego into torment, And while they drown in what they refused to face, God has not only preserved you, He has transformed you. You were never forgotten in the betrayal. You were never alone in the silence, and you were never helpless in your pain. God was writing, watching, weaving justice into the very threads of your suffering. The hands that tried to break you are now empty, and yours, once trembling, are now lifted. Let them wrestle with the regret. Let them sit in the silence they once gave you. Because God has spoken, He has declared your restoration, and when heaven moves in your defense, no past pain can stop your future glory. You are rising, beloved, and the weight they once placed on you, it's now resting on them by the hand of a God who never forgets, never sleeps, and never lets the innocent suffer without reward.